Hello and welcome to Take Back Time. My name is Penny Zenker and I'm your host. And I am always excited by the great people that I run into on my search for taking back time, for working smarter. And today I'm super excited to introduce to you Brandon Smith. And he is a leading expert in leadership communication and cure of workplace dysfunction. We're going to talk about that. Known as the workplace therapist, Brandon is a sought-after executive coach, TEDx speaker, author, and award-winning business school instructor, and he's been featured in the Wall Street Journal, Fast Company, CNN, Fox News, NPR, Forbes, and many more. So his book, The Hot Sauce Principle, which is how I ran into him, was finding this book, How to Live and Lead in a World Where Everything is Urgent and All of the Time. He helps readers to master urgency so that they can be more effective leaders and manage others' unrealistic expectations and prevent burnout at home. No better time to talk about this incredible sense of urgency that actually is part of our culture and how it's amplified with the situation of the pandemic and the environment that we're in. So Brandon, welcome to the show.
Penny, I am so glad to be on the show. And before we get started, thank you so much for protecting our most precious resource, which is time. I'm really, really glad you're on that mission because it's such an important one.
I am on the mission, but I think that it's for me, it's an interesting question. What is that my mission to protect time? I actually think that my mission is to help people live happier, more meaningful lives. And time is a vehicle, right? That's the way I see it, is that when we can protect our own time and create space for ourselves, then we're doing that. How about you? What would you say is how did you come up with the hot sauce? What's your underlying mission there?
Oh, my mission's simple. It's to eliminate all workplace dysfunction everywhere forever.
That's a really big mission. I don't know.
I've been kidding with people. I said, I just figured it out. And then there was the pandemic. And then,
right.
Then it starts all over again. Right now, we're dealing with Zoom fatigue and people having meetings at 7:30 in the morning because everyone knows you're not commuting. And there's we've kind of lost all the natural boundaries from work and life. It's just become a different world we're in today.
Well, but don't you think our boundaries were eroding before this? I mean, I always say that I think the pandemic amplified our dysfunction. I mean,
it did, but there were still some natural breaks. Like we knew, I'm not going to have the meeting with you at 5:00 or a meeting with you at 7:30 in the morning because that's your commute time, right? That's when you're taking the subway or you're driving to the office, whatever you're doing. That's your commute. So we had some natural breaks. We had some natural transition time. Now I know exactly where you are at 5:00. You know exactly where I am at 5:00. And so it just becomes this weird stew where there's not a lot of buffer.
Why do we accept that? Like, I'd be like, no, I don't start work at 7:30.
So my training originally was as a clinical therapist. And then I've also have an MBA. So that's where the workplace therapist handle comes from.
Right. They come together.
And if you think about therapists, one of the foundational ideas of healthy relationships is boundaries. And being able to set healthy boundaries is such an important job for us as human beings. We got off easier in the past because work had natural boundaries established. Particularly if we go back 20 or 30 years ago, you could only work when you were at work. You couldn't really work at home.
Right. So we didn't have to set them. They were set for us. So now it's what I'm hearing you saying is it's harder because those natural or structured based on the workplace, those are gone. And so therefore it's up to us and we're not so good at it. Is that what I'm hearing?
Yes, that's exactly right. Because it requires self-awareness and it requires being able to state and ask for what you need. And every person's different. Maybe you prefer to really meditate in the morning before you go to work or work out before you go to work or work early. Or maybe you have family commitments and that's part of the boundaries you need to set to be able to manage those. So every person has to navigate and negotiate those individually. That's a little bit harder. I mean, there's power in that, but it's also a harder conversation to have.
Yeah, because I mean, I know a lot of people feel like, well, maybe I'll get fired if I speak up, right? There's this fear factor of speaking up and for your boundaries. So I'm wondering why employers aren't being more cautious of those boundaries and conscious of those boundaries, because you're right, everybody's in a different place and it's kind of unfair.
Yeah. So it's varying by manager. Some managers are very conscious of that, and they're saying, "Oh, absolutely, we're not doing any meetings after 5 o'clock." Or I was on I did a presentation yesterday, and it was for a whole group of managers and leaders within a large healthcare organization, and they said, "No, we're not doing video. We're giving everyone a break.
Mhm.
So we're just going to be audio only." Some managers are being very conscious and aware of that and trying to care for their folks. Other managers are just saying, "I'm going to keep asking until you say no."
Right. So they're leaving it up to, which is uh, the way that it's been, right?
Yeah,
In
and that's
many cultures, many business cultures, is you've got to speak out and stand up for yourself and what your
and,
boundaries
and
are.
and there's nothing necessarily wrong with that. There's nothing necessarily wrong with saying it's your responsibility ability to tell me what you need. It's not my
Right.
responsibility to
Right.
guess.
Right.
So
Understood.
there is something fair about that, but it is it's we're all trying to figure it out. I think that's the short answer. We're all just like the world we're living in right now. We're all trying to figure this thing out.
So what are some tips to help people to be clearer and stricter about the boundaries that they'd like to set for themselves?
So the first step, the first one right out of the gate is the hardest. Be really, really clear on what you need. That's the first. And you would be stunned, or maybe not, and how many people that you ask, what do you need? And they say, I really don't know what
Right.
it is that I need.
Right.
So really you have to know yourself. What do you really need in order to be a healthy human? And to make your life work in the season
Mhm.
of life that you're in, because seasons change and needs
Yes.
change in those seasons. So you've got to be really gut level honest. Okay. And then the second step is sit down and script that conversation. Script how you want that to go with your manager, right? And kind of play that out in your head, because it is a business conversation. It doesn't have to be emotional. It doesn't have to be that big scary thing we think it is. We're going to have a business conversation, and it's in order for me to get you what you need. This is what I need. Let's find a
So
path forward.
so by scripting it out, it helps you to work through the emotional part, the fear part. Is that what I'm hearing?
Yes.
Okay.
And it helps you to start to think about what is it they need too, because this is a negotiation, right?
Hmm.
And for me to give you
Hmm.
what you need, a really important thing I talk about it in my book, but it's something I preach to all the folks that I get a chance to preach to. And that is, never, ever view your manager as a manager from now on. View them as your number one customer.
Hmm. That's a great point.
And that changes your relationship with them, because now you're saying, Miss or Mr. Customer, for me to give you what you need, which I want to, that's my goal.
Right.
Here's what I need in order to make that work. So you're going to
Right.
negotiate that. So you're still giving them. You're not saying they can't have what they want. You're saying that this is what I need in order to give you what you want. And then the third step I would say is find someone that you really trust well. Could be a spouse, could be a friend, and play it out with them. Just run it by them.
Right.
And you'll be surprised that I can't tell you how many times when people will say, I want to have this conversation. I really don't know how to do it. And they kind of talk it out. And I say, you just did it. You just said it exactly the right way that time.
Right.
You shouldn't be scared. That was perfect. It had the right amount of vulnerability and authenticity and genuineness. And so practice and play that out so you feel comfortable. And then of course, now you're ready to actually have it.
I love it. I love it. Can I challenge you a little bit so we can have a
Of
little bit of
course. Of
conversation?
course.
I like to challenge. So I'm not sure that I agree that we should negotiate our boundaries.
Yeah.
That we should, like if I need this and my normal work hours used to be 8:30 to 6 or whatever it was, I don't feel that I have to renegotiate or negotiate that I start before 8:30.
Yeah. So you're negotiating the relationship. You're not negotiating your boundaries. So let me
Okay, because I think it's important for people to
yeah,
understand that
yeah.
that doesn't
There's a
mean that they have to give in to certain points, right? There are some things that might be negotiable, but
right,
some things are boundaries that you have to
right.
set and you have to hold people to it, right? We train people how to treat us.
Right. That's exactly right. So you say to them, in order for me to get you what you want, this is what I need. Okay. If they say, no, 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 I want this from you, then you say, that's fine. I can do that, but that means you're not going to get this.
Right.
Okay. And that this
Or
might
it's
be
also okay to say, I'm sorry, but I have a family and I can't,
right.
Perhaps I could work later, or perhaps I could work through lunch. Like there could be an alternative solution without compromising your boundaries. Is that fair?
That's exactly right. That's exactly right.
Because I think that it is a huge issue for people. And I never really thought about it before this conversation, that we had those natural boundaries, and that sort of protected us and protected our time and our energy. And they went away, and we're just not good at setting them ourselves.
Right. Right.
Yeah.
That's right.
Why do you think we're not good at asking for what we need?
Because that is one of the scariest things we can ask of any other human being. Because if it's really what you need, then it's deep down core to you. And what if they say no? Mm. That's always our fear. Let's say there's something you really, really need from your significant other that just makes your heart sing. Well, it's scary to ask for that, because what if they say, no way, I'm not going to give you that. That hurts at a deeper level.
Right.
So we tend to avoid those conversations because it's so meaningful to us. We're concerned what will happen if we get rejected.
Okay. You know how you said to treat your boss like your number one customer. I really like that, because it does shift your mindset, so that you're looking to serve or to please, and I think people are generally.
But I think there's something even more important than that. When we treat them as a customer, then all of a sudden we turn on that engine that we have about managing expectations. We're much better at that when they're our customer, right? We proactively send them updates on projects. We proactively set up meetings to ask questions to clarify what success would look like. When they're our boss, we sit back passively and wait for them to give us work, wait for them to give us projects, wait for them to reach out and ask for updates.
Right. So
we would never do that if they were our customer.
So you're saying that by making them our number one customer is that we fall into more of an ownership position.
Yes.
And then we're proactive.
We lead them.
I like it.
Otherwise, we're waiting for them to lead us, and then that causes a whole bunch of problems.
Right.
And when we lead them, it's a lot easier to set boundaries. But when they're leading us, they're coming at us. We're always on our heels. So it's that orientation helps to unlock so many healthy things.
I like it. I love it. As a matter of fact, I'm going to start using it now. Absolutely. Although I don't have a boss, but I'm my boss. So sometimes I have to look at myself as my best customer and treat myself proactively. Right.
Yeah, that's right.
Let's talk about urgency now.
Okay.
And then I want to talk a little bit about your book in general and the whole concept. But so the whole idea of, everything is urgent. I think I read a book some years ago. It's a pretty old book, like from the early 80s or late 80s, the stuff that Americans are made of. And it talked about that urgency, that sense of urgency is kind of embedded in our culture.
Yeah.
And I think it's only gotten anything that is a gift can also be a curse after a certain point, right? When it's
right.
When you're not careful.
Right.
So it's out of hand now, right? People are completely overwhelmed and unable to set priorities. It's a constant discussion about managing urgency. So why has this become such an issue?
It's really accelerated probably since the last recession, because I think so many companies are in some kind of a transformation mode or trying to catch up. Usually that has to do a lot with technological infrastructure, but it could be lots of other things. You think about our friends in retail and how much that whole world has changed and been changing.
So it's
and
the
has
pace of
changed.
change that's
Just
created this sense of
pace of
urgency. That
change.
makes
Yeah.
sense.
And so John Kotter, who's a famous kind of change expert and change guru out of Harvard, any book you pick up on change management, he's either going to have written or be referenced heavily. John's like one of the godfathers in this space. Well, he's got an 8-step model for change, and he's been preaching for years. The first step is you have to create a high enough sense of urgency. So all these leaders have been taught that if I need to create change, I got to create urgency. And so there's nothing necessarily wrong with urgency. In the right doses, it's actually a really healthy, good thing. If you want to change anything in your personal life, you need urgency. And we can talk about more what are the components of that in a little bit.
Yeah,
but what's happened is, particularly in publicly traded companies where they're trying to please the shareholders, they're trying to change everything at the same time and making everything urgent all the time. And all that does is create urgency. In the clinical sense is anxiety. Okay. So that's a really important reminder for us too.
Yeah.
So when you put urgency into a system or into a person, you're intentionally creating anxiety. You're intentionally creating discomfort. Anxiety is a high energy emotion. And sometimes we need to do that. Even with my kiddos, there's been times when I need to create, they're too comfortable, Penny, and I need to make them uncomfortable on purpose.
Oh, I would have no idea what you're talking about.
Could imagine. So there are times when we have to do that. But when we create everything being urgent, we're just pumping and dumping anxiety into the system.
The boy who cried wolf, right? I mean, don't people then ignore it?
They ignore it.
Call it an expression, if everything's urgent, nothing is urgent, right? Then that's the norm.
They ignore it. And then ultimately that level of anxiety in the system will translate to burnout.
Right.
That's where the story ends. It ends in the same destination every single time, burnout, which means either the employee quits, the employee gets hospitalized, or they just say, this is, who knows what else they do, but they can't keep up that pace. It's
well, I have another theory on that. I'd like your thought. Not that it's in line with yours, but so I have this thing called the productivity curve, right? And in the center is where we're healthy, we're productive, we're focused on the things that are most important. We have the right level of urgency. And then on one side, we have perfectionism where we go over the top, right? We overfunction. And then we have procrastination where we underfunction. And if we looked at that from an emotional perspective, the procrastination is apathy. So I was just thinking, as you were saying that, it can turn into burnout or it could turn into apathy. Like, I don't care, right? Yeah. So it doesn't have to burn people out, but it'll definitely remove them out of any ownership of completing the task or working towards the goal. Do you agree with that?
I think, yeah. And I would go even further to say apathy is a sign of burnout because it's a self-protective mechanism, right? If I just numb myself to caring, almost, I'm thinking of, if you think about the TV show, The Office,
right?
Or Stanley Hudson, he would just walk in every day, get his cup of coffee, I mean, he was so over the place.
That absent, what do they call it?
Apathetic?
No, absent employee, when they show up, but they're absent. I forget what they call it.
So I think that absolutely could be a sign of
okay. I never thought of it like that. I just, but I could see that. I could definitely.
It's just a self-protective mechanism. Okay. Like I no longer am going to personally invest. They often talk about the opposite of love is apathy. It's not hate, it's apathy.
Right, absolutely.
Because I'm no longer going to emotionally invest in this person or this place.
Right.
So yeah, I mean, you get far enough, you push me far enough in burnout, that's what I'm going to do because I've got to protect myself.
Right. Okay. Yeah, absolutely. So, so you say, so there's this creation of discomfort and anxiety. So is that the organization that, that's creating that? How does the employee deal with that? Like, so it's turning into burnout. How did they, let's say their organization is totally unaware of the amount of pressure that they're putting on them and are not going to stop in any time soon. How other than being apathetic and turning, going to the hospital with burnout or just not caring anymore, what can they do to offset this? Everything is urgent.
Yeah. So we can go back to something we talked about earlier. Turn your manager or whoever it is that's putting this hot sauce on you and turn them into a customer and then sit down with Mr. and Miss Customer and say, I completely understand that this is urgent, and this is urgent, and this is urgent, and this is urgent. I'd love to spend some time just getting your help prioritizing these things.
Mm-hmm.
Having that conversation to make them prioritize them in order, rather than having them be like hub and spoke where they're all equally urgent and you got to do them all now, and having those trade-off conversations. And also let them know, say, look, I can get you this and this, but but I can't do it by this date. But if you want this and this and this by that date, then I need more resources, or let's talk about other options. So it's just having some prioritization and managing expectation conversations.
Yeah. Yeah. I was just talking to a group last week, talking about that managing of expectations, and also understanding that expectations have to match the circumstances.
Yes.
So with the pandemic, right, that sometimes the expectations are pre-pandemic expectations that just don't work during the pandemic and certain people's circumstances. So, that's one way, I think, to also manage your manager, so to speak, is to make them aware of the circumstances that you might be under or what's changed, and help to manage that.
Right. So a lot of these techniques that we're talking about, and others that, I referenced in the book, they work in every single case except for one.
What's that?
They don't work if you're dealing with a adult that is not a fully formed adult or fully rational.
So that means everyone?
Well, no, I mean, if as a manager, if you're willing to make trade-offs and compromise, and willing to, and recognize that we are in 2021, not 2018. I mean, if you're willing to, but some people aren't. Some people just think in their mind, if I push harder and ask for everything, I get it all. Well, they have an irrational set of expectations of what is possible and capable, and maybe they just don't care. Maybe they're on some kind of a spectrum, like a narcissist. Like, it doesn't really matter what you want. I want what I want, and you better give it to me, or you're not going to be employed here.
Is it possible that some are under that as a circumstance where they had to let go of people because they have less resources, but they still have the same deadlines and capacity that they have to meet? Is there that where they'd like to be more meet people where they're at type of thing, but they just don't know how because of the circumstances around us? What would you say to that?
I would say that tension is normal and natural. That happens all the time. Mm-hmm. It still requires compromise and negotiation. Still requires a realistic, rational approach. Like if there's, let's say you're my leader, and there was myself and two other coworkers, both other coworkers quit, and you say to me, well, Brandon, we still have a deadline. You're just going to have to do both their jobs. It's due tomorrow. You can ask for that all day long, but if I physically can't do it, I'm saying, no, I'm sorry, Penny, you can't have that. There's only one of me. I can't do that. It's not possible. I'm sorry. I don't know who you need to tell that you're not going to deliver, but I'm happy to help you have that message, but it's not going to happen.
Right.
So there has to be some level of groundedness in reality, which is the rational part. They've got to have some level of rationality.
But that's why I said everyone, because I think that many people they're not rational, right? Because when we're really stressed out, then we lose that side of our brain that's rational, right? We're into fight, flight, or freeze mode, where we aren't in full access to that. So how would you say that managers should deal with that if they find themselves in that position?
So I think it has to be a conversation that feels more like a partnership or a team, so it can't, I once had someone describe this image to me, and I think it's a beautiful image. They said, whenever I was sitting down trying to work with an employee or deliver even performance review, I didn't do what typical managers would do, which is sit across the desk.
Right.
I'd pull up a chair next to them.
Right.
And put the document in front of both of us. So we're looking at it together. Mm-hmm. That needs to be the orientation for both managers and employees. Mm-hmm. Be kind of shoulder to shoulder, looking at the problem together.
I like it.
So it's not adversarial. When it's adversarial, it's I win or you lose, or you win and I lose.
Right.
But that's not the world we're in right now. We're going to have to work together to figure out a solution that's going to work for everybody. The best case scenario, given the circumstance.
So tell me, I love it. I'm starting to think here about a little bit about some of the things that I remember in your book. And I really liked you talking about, the fact that you talk about it being that hot sauce, right? The hot sauce principle. So tell us more about the hot sauce principle and how we can use it to our advantage when we need it, and how to back off. How do we find that right amount of hot sauce that makes it taste good and also isn't too hot?
Yeah. So building on our idea of urgency, from now on, when any of your listeners think of urgency, I want you to think of hot sauce. And hot sauce is a good thing. I love hot sauce. You put hot sauce on food, it adds a little bit of focus, a little bit of flavor, a little bit of spice, and that's great. But if everything coming out of the kitchen is covered in hot sauce, the appetizer and the salad, the entree, the dessert, the iced tea, if you're like me, you're going to be curled up on a ball. So that is really the concept. It's knowing what to put urgency on, or what to put hot sauce on, and how to use that in the right ways. And why I also like the analogy is when you're applying it to people, it's just like me with hot sauce. Some people can just 1 or 2 drops is great.
That's it, right?
Other people need like the whole big bottle. You just got to douse them with it. So the circumstance can also dictate how much you need to use.
Mm-hmm.
But the key is, if I kind of cut to the chase, you want to minimize the number of priorities that you make urgent, that you put hot sauce on. So I'll share with you my favorite story that kind of illustrates that point. So some years ago, I was working with a client and I was talking about this analogy of hot sauce. And he was a very anxious guy, small business owner, but one of the most anxious small business owners I've ever met. Like, he probably should never have gone into entrepreneurship. He's that anxious. Okay.
Right.
And he had a 50-person technology marketing company. And his people were like just getting burned out, because he said he comes in every day just worrying about everything, makes everything urgent all the time. So I tell him about this analogy. Well, on his own, he came up with this brilliant idea. He went out to the grocery store. He bought 3 bottles of hot sauce and he stuck them on his desk. 1, 2, 3. And then whenever there was a new project that was urgent, when he gave that project to an owner in his company, to one of his direct reports, he would hand them a bottle of hot sauce to indicate this is urgent. He'd say, here, this bottle means this thing is really urgent. You keep this on your desk until the project is complete. And here's the beautiful thing about that. He only had 3 bottles he could give out at a given time.
Cool.
So 3 to 5 is the rule. No more than 5 things can be kind of urgent and important.
For any one person?
At a given time. As a leader, that's about how many initiatives you want to have going on at the same time.
Okay.
Now, where it gets more complicated is if we're in a larger organization. My leader, she's got things that are urgent and important, and she can follow that rule. But she's got a peer who also has things that are urgent and important, and she might come knocking on my door.
Right.
So one person's hot sauce might not be another person's hot sauce. So it requires a lot of that that expectation management when you sit in the middle.
Mm-hmm. I like it. It's really really clever. And I think we really can relate and associate well with different types of metaphors like that. So I like it. And you can get those little mini bottles, right? And yeah.
I buy the mini bottles from Tabasco Loves Me. I buy these by the case. So back in the days when I would do this, these kind of talks in person, I'd give everybody a little mini bottle and say, stick it on your desk.
That's funny. I have, my thing is Rubik's Cube. So I talk around the Rubik's Cube and I give out little mini Rubik's Cube. So it's funny.
Nice.
So what else do we need to know about managing urgency? Like, is there anything else that you haven't told us yet that's an important tip that we need to?
I can add 2 more to it, and then we'll see where else you'd like to go. So first, remember, let's back up a little bit. If I'm going to put urgency into the system, I'm going to make somebody feel this.
Mm-hmm.
I have to have established trust first, because in that moment I'm making them uncomfortable, and they're going to ask themselves, do I even know this guy? Do I trust him enough to allow him to make me feel this way?
Mm-hmm.
So don't jump in on day one driving urgency. That isn't going to work very well. You've got to make sure you build that relationship, build trust before you start to create discomfort. Okay. Um, the only other point I'd add to this too is why urgency is so important is that discomfort triggers in people a desire to take action to make it go away. That's why we use urgency.
Right.
It
Right.
creates a desire for action. So if you've ever woken up in the middle of the night thinking about work, that's workplace anxiety or workplace urgency knocking on your head in the middle of the night. And most of us, the way we cope with that is we get up and we maybe just do some work. We shoot some emails off or get ready to send some emails the next morning or grab our little notepad next to our bed and write down some thoughts, kind of take it out of our head and put it down, make a plan, right? But urgency stimulates action. So you don't want to completely overwhelm people by just dousing them with urgency. You want just enough so they're ready for an action plan.
Hmm.
Whether we're talking about getting an employee to change their behavior or we're actually trying to drive change with a whole department or company.
Makes sense. Makes sense. So let's shift gears a little bit. I'd like to, ask a couple of questions to all my guests. How do you define productivity and why?
It's a good question. I would say the way I define productivity is thinking about what are your life priorities in a given day or week, and making sure you are being intentional about using that old analogy of putting the big rocks in first, making
Mhm.
sure you're being intentional about putting those in your calendar first. So for me, productivity is very tactical. It's all about calendar management and putting in and protecting the important things in your calendar first every week. So I think that's an important way I would define it. The other way I would define it is not only by, things you accomplished at the end of the week, but how you felt along the way.
That's funny. I say the same thing.
Oh,
I
great.
haven't heard anyone else say that out of all the people that I've interviewed. I was saying similar type of thing. I think that's great. Kind of like happiness. It's a feeling, right?
Yeah.
It's a feeling that you're productive.
Yeah. If you're just exhausted and like just clawing at it and getting things done,
Right. It's not
that's not a
productive.
fun journey. That's not, and in many ways, our workplaces are kind of like interval training. It's high intensity, but you need rest. High intensity, rest.
And then rest.
And so many workplaces are just like, no, high intensity until you drop. And that's not a
Right.
good feeling. So I'm glad we're on the
Right. There's
same
no
page.
off season, right? If you look at any sport, there's an off season.
That's right.
And we are, we are the athletes that have no off season. So if
It,
we don't take those little opportunities like weekends and vacations and the things that we need to reset, it is a huge drain on our system.
so I will say this, if I look into my crystal ball, and your crystal ball probably shows the same thing, I see a lot more hybrid workplaces going forward
Oh
where
yeah,
people are
for sure.
working some at home and some at work. And most of those are probably going to be Fridays and Mondays at home, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday in the office for meetings.
Hmm.
If that is how things start to play out, I highly encourage folks to take kind of quarterly long weekends
Mm.
as your interval break. Just take a leave on Thursday, come back on Monday, and you get this nice long mini vacation, and do it once a quarter. You can still do a regular vacation, but that break is, I think, it'd be well needed for folks.
Absolutely. I think that's a great suggestion, right? Quarterly to take that just that extra time.
Yeah, and even if you have to work part of one of those days, you're remote, and everybody's remote. Doesn't matter if you're
Right.
on the beach. Just fire up your laptop for 4 hours or something, and at least you're in a different place. And
It
it's
does make a difference, right? To change that location, even if, like you said, you're working a little bit, if you're by the beach or you're somewhere else, it's almost like it doesn't count.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
I agree. Changing locations, I think even in your own house, right, can make a big difference. Or in your that's why some people like to work in a coffee shop or to be in different locations. It gives you different energy. And sometimes this same environment, it gets for whatever reason, it's not a creative space anymore.
Agreed.
So awesome. What if everything was taken off your phone and your desktop? I know you're going to say calendar first, so let's not include the calendar and the email. What's the first app that you would put on that helps you be more efficient and effective during your day?
I'm a cheat. I'm not going to answer the question exactly the way you intended.
Ugh.
I know. I can't believe I'm being so difficult. Um, An old school little pad of yellow paper and a pen.
Well, I'm not going to let you answer that way.
I can't
I
answer
use
that way.
paper too. I use paper too.
I lost your audio.
Yeah. Oh, did you really? Or you were just saying that because I said I'm not going to accept that answer? Can you still hear me?
What?
You can't hear me?
Oh, you're back. You're back. I lost you just for a second. I
thought
really did lose you
because you didn't like that I said I wasn't going to accept that answer.
That's
so
right.
Like, oh, can't hear you. Can't hear you. So I get it. I'm a paper person too. I still like to write things on paper. But clearly you use and what I'm getting at is like I have a couple little tools that are super helpful for me. Like I have this thing called Text Expander. So it allows me to put hashtag gig, and every time I'm putting in something out for my gig, it'll bring up this whole blurb formatted so that I don't have to write the whole thing and I don't have to search for it. Right. So that's just like a huge time saver for me. Do you have something like that you might recognize that you use?
Wow, that is such a good question, and I don't have a good answer to that question.
Okay, that's all right.
Maybe the answer is I need to go find one.
I don't know. Well, what's your biggest time waster? There we go. We'll start there.
Yeah, my biggest time waster right now is probably administrative stuff, although I've tried to get rid of as much of that stuff as I can. So my mantra historically has always been, what can I say no to? What can I delegate, or what can I outsource?
Mm-hmm.
I had a client last week though, and he shared with me the 4 Ds, and I thought that was really good. He said, what do I need to do? What do I need to delegate? What do I need to delay? And what do I need to delete? I really like that.
That's cool. I like it.
I haven't thought about delay. Yeah.
I have something called the 1-3-5 planning rule. So in your scheduling, you can take one thing that you're working towards a long-term strategic goal, 3 things that bring you towards midterm milestones. So there you have your important things that typically would not get done at all, right?
Yep, right.
And then your urgent things, which are 5 things that absolutely must be done by you today.
I love that. That's beautiful.
Yeah. So
I think I would just need to download whatever you're doing. Your show would be the thing I would download.
There you go. I like it. All right. I'll give you the money for that afterwards. So anyway, we're at the end of our time today. You were great. Loved having you on the show and really some of those really core conversations. Today, we talked about boundaries, which is huge. We talked about urgency, which there is some overlap, but also distinctly separate. And really just some really great protecting your time was an overall arching piece of it. So thank you so much for being here.
Penny, I had a great time. Thanks for having me.
Where can people find out more about you and your book? Do you have a website we can send them to?
The easiest place is you can even Google it, because I'm the only one, The Workplace Therapist. So you can go to www.theworkplacetherapist.com or just Google The Workplace Therapist and you'll find me. And on that site is podcasts and blogs and articles, all free resources for folks just to make their workplaces healthier. And then they can also order my book. My book is available on Amazon, or they can order it directly from me and I'll send them a signed copy.
Awesome. Well, we'll definitely put those links in the show notes so that you guys can easily click and get to where you need to go. Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Brandon.
Thanks, Penny. Have a really great weekend.
You too. And you all have a great weekend too, if you're listening to this when it came out on Friday, as that's when Take Back Time comes out. So if you're a new listener, please subscribe to all of our different channels on iTunes and check us out on YouTube, check us out on the website. We are dedicated to helping you find great people like Brandon who have their unique twist to how you can take back time and how you can work smarter and protect your time so that it works for you and not against you. So we'll see you in the next episode. My name is Penny Zenker and I'm your host. This is Take Back Time. We'll see you in the next episode.